I think programmatic supply chains undergoing a bit of a transition period at the moment. As programmatic as a concept, a principle of way of buying has developed, I don't think there's many people that disagree that it's become bloated. There are a lot of players seeing a lot of opportunity, and of course, technology follows where the money is. I liken the supply chain. In fact, let me take one step back. There's been a lot of focus on transparency from advertisers and industry in general on transparency. Typically, that's stopped at the agency. So contracts are transparent, relationships with that point of buying are transparent with DSPs. But one area that's escaped it historically has been the supply chain. And I likened it last year to how the blind network industry of 10 years ago or so was. And we have a supply chain that had become bloated, full of players that weren't really adding value, undifferentiated inventory supply. And so I think we hit a point where that needed to be looked into. We needed to start resolving some of the issues that have arisen as a result of that. There's always been a focus on brand safety, fraud, viewability. We talked more recently about tech tax. And so the whole supply chain has been ripe for a bit of a closer inspection. From a Havas Media perspective, we talk about MX or media experience as a philosophy by which we buy. And really that looks into the context, the connection that we have with users and the content that we're buying against. And if we take that principle and apply it to how we run in programmatic, we can't hand on heart say that we follow that philosophy if we don't have a grip on the supply chain and therefore financial operational transparency that goes along with it. So I think the future of it, what we've seen at the beginning of last year, we made a positive step forward to say we don't want to have 42 supply vendors accessing our demand. We don't want to have a lack of knowledge over where our dollars are going. So we consolidated this down to 7 partners. We demanded financial operational transparency, and subsequently we've seen a lot of other holding companies and a lot of other discussion around this area. And it really helps the more people are engaged in this, it helps clean up that environment. The big implication from it, or the big result of it, is we've seen lower fraud, we've seen higher viewability, and we've also managed to start getting a grip on the price of media. And we're now able to talk to our clients about that full waterfall. You remember the ANA with their expose in 2015 around costs, and more recently PwC and ISBA conducted a report in the UK which suggested that 15% of inventory or dollars were going somewhere into the ether. We're able to refute that because we're able to start talking exactly within the chain where each of those cents are going from a dollar and present that to clients. And I think as a leadership position, but also as a principle by which the supply chain needs to operate, I think that's really where we're going now.
And Andrew, a little bit more narrowly, what do you expect of a modern day DSP? You've chosen a certain number of them. What are the sort of the value points that you seek in a DSP?
I think DSPs are in a really interesting spot right now, because increasingly we're choosing and we're wanting to work closely and partner with the SSPs. As a DSP used to be a gateway to supply and used to control those relationships themselves. So we see that more as a partnership between ourselves and DSP to be able to facilitate those relationships that we'll hold with the SSPs. Where their real value adds come into it is through partnering on data, how we apply third-party technologies, and what integrations that they might have, which would allow us to apply rules, I guess, across our buys. and help us enforce some of those transparency measures that we've been talking about. One of the biggest challenges we've got is, how do you, when you've got pieces of technology involved, they don't always do the same thing. So when I'm talking about counting impressions being a fundamental one, and so you need the ability to try and line up all the metrics that you're trying to measure, and do it in a way where there's minimal loss of granularity, or at least there's equality and we agree on what those numbers might be. And I think the DSP is a pivotal point in order to assist and make sure that happens. Aside from that, there's always a battle, I suppose, an arms race as to who's got algorithms that suit certain creative types. We see a huge increase in video and connected TV, OTT, but display is still relevant. And I think we've seen a divergence of DSPs as they try and focus on particular areas of media, and so they still have a very key role to play, and there's much more a closer partnership with the agency, as opposed to being just a vendor. The DSP helps us enforce those buying channels. I can't buy on an SSP currently with the controls that we need to put in place for a campaign without a DSP. And so we require DSPs to have those relationships with those SSPs that we choose. Here's a great case in point. We recently, I say recently, it's in August, we implemented our marketplaces of social equity. And that was really to focus on bringing forward supply from underrepresented areas of the industry. So we started off with Black and Indigenous people of color, businesses owned by Black and Indigenous people of color, because we know that inventory is underrepresented through SSPs, and often it wasn't made to be competitive. So we decided to make a point of highlighting that inventory, bringing it forward, and that required us to have a relationship with some smaller providers that were able to focus on those areas. And therefore we needed DSPs that were able to access that supply and have a partnership with those SSPs. And so those that are willing, and those that are leaned in, become valuable to us. They allow us to execute on our strategic choices, and able to implement the initiatives that we have.
And finally, there's a lot of conversation about the changing toolkit that you guys have, that the programmatic world has, with the deprecation of the third-party cookies, privacy regulations, and of course, Apple's upcoming changes in IDFA. So how do you as a buyer sort of deal with, and this is a whole other conversation, can go on for days, but the toolkit is changing. How will the industry change, in your opinion, to maintain efficiency, or to, in fact, improve efficiency?
There's a big unknown in all of this. Or generally, I'll preface this with, there's a lot of unknowns. And just slightly tangentially, this whole year has been a maelstrom of issues and challenges, and not just around deprecation of third-party cookies, not just what Apple doing, but of course, COVID and the whole issues around social justice, and all of them are actually interacting with each other. Pair that with how media is changing anyway. We look at the growth of CTV and the convergence of traditional and digital video, and the impact that has on how we buy, the implications of that, because some of that's not all trackable anyway. So that highlights some of or supports perhaps some of the areas around how we're buying with or without cookies. Look, I love this industry anyway, and specifically the part that I'm in, because it changes every 6 months, and we tend to be fairly adaptable to those changes. It's not yet clear in my mind what those final solutions are. we recently joined Prebid as a holding company, the first buying tier within Prebid, exactly to start having a conversation about what is the implication of privacy regulations, those regulated and also self-imposed through the industry. And I think one thing is clear, that is that we have a danger that we allow the Googles and the Facebooks to run away with single sign-on solutions to gather up data to create huge behemoth walled gardens that then shut out the smaller independent players, and we need to be able to have, it's healthy to have counterpoints to those. And so that's why through Prebid is that amalgamation of independent voices and bodies that we need to coalesce to provide an ability to get user ID, granularity on user ID, to be able to use that to target and so on. There's no doubt that we will change what we have to do in terms of measurement and targeting. I think that's a given. But are there proxies to those that are effective? How do we get our house in order for measurement, for attribution? Something that seems to feel like it's been broken for so long. We talk about attribution all the time, but I'm still yet to be convinced we have a truly effective way of doing it. And I think we're in for quite a wholesale change, I suppose, in media. I mentioned before about CTV and the growth of that and the impact that that's having on the the huge prize that is TV money, and how user experience is driving that, how COVID has driven that, accelerated that perhaps. And some of the inherent issues around targeting are the same as that we have to deal with within cookies and the deprecation of that. So maybe I've skirted around your question a little bit, but we could talk this time next year, and I think you'll see some identity solutions that have come into play. Perhaps a second-party data marketplaces that starts bringing up. Certainly, use of first-party data, clearinghouses, in order to make publisher data accessible will grow, and I think that'll be a huge growth space if it isn't already.